We'll kick off now. So I'm delighted. My name is John Craig. I'm co-chair of the PSA's Teaching and Learning Network, and I'm delighted to invite Alex Mihai here today to speak about supporting students in digital learning. Alex is at UCL and has done a lot of work in this area. In terms of housekeeping, please keep your microphones muted. We are recording this and a copy will be made available on YouTube. So if you don't want to be seen, please do turn off your camera. And as we go, please post any questions you have in the chat function. And when Alex is through with her presentation part, I will then be taking questions from the chat area and addressing those to Alex. So without any further ado, over to Alex.
Hi, thank you very much, John. Thanks to all of you for joining this afternoon. I hope it will be a nice and fruitful way of spending 1 hour trying to discuss and learn some more about what we can do in this online environment, what we can do to improve learning, to improve our teaching, to make it more effective, but also more interesting with the use of technology. So just a little bit about myself before I start. I'm both a political scientist and an educational scientist, so I'm really thrilled to be here today to share my thoughts with all of you, because I feel like I have quite a bit in common with you in terms of the topics that I've been teaching, that I'm currently teaching, but I also can bring a different angle, the educational angle, the teaching with technology angle, which was the topic of my PhD. So I do hope I can be of help basically to answer any queries you have about how you can meaningfully, as the title says, use technology in your teaching. So I will start sharing my screen. I will have the program for today is more or less classic. So I will start with the presentation. It shouldn't be very long because, as I said, I'm not here to talk myself, to hear myself as well. I would just like to spark some ideas, explain some types of activities that can be useful, and after that try to get the discussion going. So yeah, that's more or less what we will be doing today. So first of all, we'll try to look at technology from a slightly different perspective. More of an enabler rather than an obstacle in teaching and learning. So just trying to shift a bit the perspective. Not that I take it for granted that all of you find it an obstacle, but I have done quite a lot of research before COVID, and there wasn't that much use of technology. I'll get back to that in a second. But so I'm really curious to discuss with you after this 8, 9, I don't know, too many months of being fully online. What are your thoughts? And then we'll talk a little bit, again, this is not the main topic of today, but I want to briefly talk about asynchronous online learning activities. So what is the potential there? Because we often resort to these live sessions simply because they resemble more the face-to-face environment, but there is a lot of potential elsewhere. And then I will focus, actually, that's the core of my presentation, because I thought it's useful to identify concrete methods in which you can meaningfully use technology in order not to leave it just at a theoretical level. And I identified two, also based on my experience, but also with the experience of professors I've been working with, interacting with practitioners, so different ways of doing that. And the second one is a different type of activity using ePortfolios, so more reflection, independent learning, and so on. So they are quite different. It's more on interaction and one more on reflection. Also to give you a choice on what to discuss in your breakout rooms. And then, of course, at the end, I really look forward to discussing your questions. So that was my agenda, but why not discuss your questions? So what I will try to do now, and I hope this works, because to be honest, sometimes it just doesn't. So then we can also discuss in chat or yeah, you can voice your comments. I hope you can all see the questions, and I will launch it now. So I do hope you can get it, you can access it with the code that you see there. Yeah, I see that already people start to answer, so that's good. I will show you, I will share the screen later, and I will show you, actually not later, but I will share it with you now, so that you see the result in real life. So yeah, this is how it looks like. I'm just curious because I have done quite a lot of mostly qualitative research before COVID on the use of teaching politics on the use of technology in teaching politics and IR. And yeah, you know, that this is emerging, the results are emerging, but I found that the use of technology, at least in the more integrated and meaningful way, was not extremely widespread. So of course, these events are mainly attended by people who have been using technology and have been innovating in teaching. So I'm not surprised to see the quite equal distribution. Of course, there is a lot to be discussed, what I mean by basic tools, but I think you understand it's mainly PowerPoint, internet, and email. So yes, that's I will leave it for a few more seconds. It's quite interesting to see because, of course, now we have to do it. We all have to do it. So it's sort of imperative. But how we do it also is based on the pedagogy or the sort of teaching philosophy we have had before COVID. So it's not all reinventing the wheel. And this is also one of the core themes of my talk today. It's not about the tools. It is all about how we use them. So I think I'm going to switch to the next question, actually. Let me do it. Why can't I switch to the next question? Oh yeah. So I hope you now can access my second question. Use one word to describe your experience with teaching online right now. So not before COVID, not in the future. How do you feel about teaching with technology or teaching online right now? I like the first word already. This is great. I also like the second. It's so true. but is good. Oh, wow, frustrating stays in the center. That's great. I guess that's why you're all here. You want to find out how you could make it less frustrating. Nevertheless, great that you made time for that. Time consuming, frustrating. Of course, interactive as well, but I get the point. Complicated, yes. Isolating, yes, indeed. Very, very interesting. I really I actually like this word clouds usually because it really takes the temperature of the room somehow in a very, very easy way. Difficult engagement. Well, let's see. We'll try to engage a bit later. Clunky, often, all too often. Unreliable, confusing. Yeah, interesting. Very interesting. Thank you. Thank you so much for engaging with this. I will stop sharing now and share back my presentation. Thanks a lot. Thanks a lot for that. Okay, so we are talking, as I said, not about technology. The center of the talk today is not about technology. It's about learning. So I think, first of all, again, it might sound, when you look at it now, it might sound or look like common knowledge, but actually, it's very important to remember that learning also happens when we are not around. Again, it's not rocket science, but we often forget because we are thinking in the pattern of classroom interaction that we have been used to. So, but learning also happens when you're not around, and also it happens outside the classroom. Again, not a huge paradigm change. It's always been there. However, acknowledging it, I think, gives us a bit of room for maneuver when we talk about using technology. So how about technology? How do we look at technology? How do we perceive it? Do we see it rather as an obstacle? I mean, the word cloud is quite telling. It can be seen as both. It can be seen as an obstacle. It makes everything harder. non-responsive, it makes students lazy. I'm just reading from the word cloud. It's isolating, but it can also be interactive, innovative, help you use multimedia, creative, engaging. Yeah, so it's a lot. You can really see it both ways. But I think what I am trying, or the way I'm trying to frame today's talk, is that in order to try to use technology in the most effective possible way and most creative possible way, is to try to think of or to focus on the more positive side of that word cloud. But as you see there, exactly like in the word cloud, things are mixed. It's not like this is the good and this is the bad and we weigh them. So you have to do that all in your minds, and of course, according to your practice and reflection. So I think what are the main points that go for technology or for using technology? It allows for a flexible setup. Yes? Sorry? Sorry, somebody was saying something, so I thought I have a problem with my microphone or something. So it allows for a flexible setup, which is very important, but it also can be very difficult to manage, especially without experience. And by now we've all gathered this experience, but in the very beginning, it's very difficult because you're normally very, very linked to this idea of a schedule, of a timetable. So now having to reorganize your learning and your teaching according to a very different time scale, and space is very different. So it's very flexible, but that can be also not always a positive point. In order to make the most of it, you need to really think creatively and think differently about the teaching. Also, another positive, let's say, for technology that, but again, positive, also with the negative side, is that it allows for multimodal expression. So you have different ways, written, audio, video, pictures, and so on. So this is good for both you and the students in order to express, to allow yourself and the students to express them, to express freely and more, well, freely, I mean more creatively and in a way that suits them best at the respective time. Technology can also help, again, if the course or the activities are designed well, do away with the idea of linear learning. So just moving from A to B to C and trying to make it a bit more interesting, to make it a bit more, learning by association, connecting concepts and so on. And I'll come back to that because one of the activities, in fact, both, but definitely one, the ePortfolio really goes back to that idea as well. And let's not forget skills. I mean, maybe it's a byproduct, but it's an important byproduct. While using technology, both you and your students are developing digital and information literacy skills. And this is not an easy one. It's not the topic of today, unfortunately, maybe just tangentially with ePortfolio as well. I will mention it. But I think it's important to see it as a training ground as well, because none of us are perfect, nor the students, actually, because we think they are digital natives, but it's often not the case, actually. So I think it's a learning process there with information and digital literacy. But I think all in all, technology can help connect, and technology can facilitate learning and teaching. So, or make it more effective, at the very least. But again, the main message, it's not all about the tools. So, as I said, I will try to introduce you very, very briefly before we get to the two activities into the idea of asynchronous online teaching and online learning. Okay, we've heard a lot about synchronous and asynchronous since the beginning of the pandemic. And I have to admit, having taught online for about 10 years now, I never thought in those terms. I never thought in terms of synchronous, asynchronous. All my courses were basically what I see now as asynchronous. But of course, these days, I think the differentiation is important, but not the dichotomy, because a lot of people start to think, okay, I do one, but then I can't do the other. Or, you have to go all the way in one direction. I think both of them are part of the learning continuum and should be. They both have their advantages and pitfalls. And if used properly, a mix of the two of them can really, really enhance the learning experience. But that's the point. Face-to-face, live interaction, synchronous interaction like we are having now is a bit closer to the classroom experience. Although, as I experience it now and you experience it when you teach online, it's very different because you are talking to a screen essentially. So let's not forget that part. It's not really like face-to-face, but it is the closest when you get into discussions and so on. Asynchronously, it's a little bit a different, I mean, it takes a little bit more design or pedagogical thinking behind it. So you need to consider quite a few things, how you mix the activities, how you sequence the activities, very, very important, how you communicate these activities as well. They have to make sense on their own, but also as a whole, building on each other, sometimes having feedback loops. So everything is a little bit more, or has to be more directed. It's not spontaneous, definitely, that we know. Online interaction has to be more purposefully and consciously designed and directed. So that, a little caveat here, actually, for active learning, it is not an easy one because you need to give, you need to be much more present than you would normally be in your active learning classroom. So that's, again, topic for a different session. I'm opening up here quite a few different doors, but I just want to make you think you need to be present, you need to be much more involved in directing what's happening in the online environment, both live and asynchronously, than in the classroom. So again, that you need to keep in mind. As for the different activities, as I'm not going to repeat what is on the slide, but basically the idea is to try to give a mix. I mean, you would try that in the classroom, ideally as well. Mix passive with active content and expectations from the students, individual with group activities, but also think about activities that the students can do or should do independently and where you are needed. And that's actually also an important point. Try to make sure you understand or you think very clearly about the moments in this online learning process where you can bring most added value and where you are needed, and try to design those interactions with your students in a suitable way. It can be live, but it also can be asynchronously. It can be answering to a discussion forum with a video. It can be being there, giving feedback to tasks in a timely manner, and so on. It's your decision, but it's something to be considered more purposefully than in the classroom. So yeah, that was the first part, a bit more general. So that was the educational scientist in me. And now let's switch back to Alex, the political scientist, if I remember how to be that. Because for quite a while, I've been working in positions where I wasn't fully involved in teaching politics. I do still teach a few courses, more as a hobby, but because I really want to keep in touch, that really keeps me grounded and keeps me really connected to what is going on in the classroom. So I kind of insist on that. And I think it's very important also for educational developers to try, if possible, to also have teaching experience. So coming back to politics and IR, I think, of course, I'm generalizing there. So I couldn't put all the learning goals that you would have in all the courses. But I think generally what we notice in our classroom is that the main learning goals have to do, with understanding, explaining and understanding complex concepts and processes, applying linking theory with practice, developing skills like critical thinking, teamwork, communication, and so on, including building and defending an argument. So that's part of communication, but also very much linked to the discipline. And last but not least, engagement with political actors and with current events. So again, it's just a mix. It's a really, merging all the different ideas and possible goals together. But it's just to give a background for the two activities that I decided to bring forward to you today. So the first one is about interacting with practitioners. Now, I know quite a lot of courses in politics and IR have to some extent either guest lectures or visits to institutions, which of course these days are not really on the agenda. But in any case, in one way or another interacting with an expert in the field, with a practitioner, with a policymaker at regional level, at local level, at national level or EU, whatever. So an expert that complements what is going on in your academic part of the course. So normally it would look like that. You either go to the institution, you are in a meeting room, or this person comes to the classroom. But nowadays it's not possible. And it also might not be the most effective way to do it, in fact. So maybe take a minute to think about how you could do it differently. Or what are the most important things to consider when we are inviting or embedding interaction with practitioners in the classroom? I think it's very, very important to embed this, to embed the activity as such very well in the course. It has to be meaningful. This person has to, well, the intervention of the expert has to complement well what you are talking about, but also has to bring new knowledge, so to provide access to new knowledge or expertise, or even a different angle or a different perspective to your students, an angle that you, from your academic perspective, cannot provide. So again, this quite common sense, but I think this is the first thing we have to consider when deciding to integrate or invite a practitioner into the classroom, be it virtual or face-to-face. So make it meaningful. Organize it well, including preparatory time with the students, having them read things, research, either give them the materials or have them research. You can integrate it with different exercises, of course, then more research-based or so on. So preparatory part, then the real interaction part, again, direct it a little bit more, as I was mentioning before, at least online, this is very important, but even for face-to-face, having them really prepare the questions before and almost direct the whole process. This is really, really important for it to be really effective. And then last but not least, and this is something really, really important, try to, well, make space for a debriefing session. And for a session, well, reflection also, give students a part or a task, or in whatever way you think of it, where they can reflect on what they learned from the practitioner and how it links to the overall course. But ultimately, what I want to say here is that having a guest practitioner or a guest lecturer is not a moment for you to take a day off. I know most of you know that, but I just want to underline it because I think the role of the teacher here is very important. And often, if there are too many guest lecturers or practitioners, students might also voice their concern that basically that is a lazy teacher because they just outsource. Well, make sure they understand why it is not simply outsourcing. Make sure it's a activity that makes sense in the context of your course. So make the links very clear and very explicit. And that's something that goes throughout teaching with technology, communicating and making links very, very explicit between activities so that students understand why and how it builds on what they learned before and how it feeds into what they will probably learn or have to do afterwards. So that is very, very important. And also in respect to the expert or the practitioner, this person is not an academic. So you are the link between, the in-between person. So you can't expect the person to do assessment or to do extra work. They are there to provide this specific specialized knowledge or expertise, but you are the one that has to bring all that back into the course. So the teacher presence cannot be underestimated here. I will let you read this. Of course, you will have the slides afterwards as well. I'm just giving you an example from my own practice. So I've been using this activity that I call expert in residence for, I don't know, 4 or 5 years in my EU policy, well, EU institutions and EU decision-making courses. And I found it really useful. As I said, I had been teaching online for a long time, but I hadn't really done a lot of webinars. Of course, sometimes I did, but most of the things were going on the VLE, on the learning platform. So that's why I came up with this activity. And basically what it is, it's a deconstructed webinar in which, in fact, the students are interacting with the practitioner on a discussion forum. Now, at first sight, you might say, well, but that's not going to go so much in depth. Well, we can discuss that. I mean, you can ask me more questions about it. But what I found actually, so it is asynchronous. The students can prepare the questions. They have a time a week before to prepare. They have the biography of the expert. And then the interaction with the expert takes place on 2 or 3 days, evenings. And yeah, so they answer all the questions, and there is a comeback, and then again they answer the follow-up questions. So it grew to be a very nice activity, very appreciated by the students, especially because they said they can actually learn more from each other. First of all, they feel more prepared, but they also feel like they have the time to actually think about the task, to actually get into it, and to learn both from each other and from the expert. So basically they said, well, I might have not had the idea of asking this question, but because my colleagues asked it, I learned much more. And for the expert, it's also very practical, because you decide well ahead for a time period. They know that for 2 evenings, they can have to commit 1 or 2 hours. Again, this is very flexible. This is the way I do it. But for instance, this year, I try also various modalities. So one expert answers with videos, one expert does a webinar. So I do try different ways because I want to make the most of this multimodality. But in principle, how I've been running it for a long time is on a discussion forum. And again, looking forward to your questions at the end, because I don't want to dwell now on it too much, but I think it's been working really, really well. And the second activity, now we turn to something rather different, are ePortfolios. I'm not sure how many of you are really familiar with the concept, but probably yes, but not necessarily having used it in the classroom. Well, the idea is that you can also see it as a blog. I think some of you have been using blogs. It's a little bit similar, but depends a lot on the platform that's used as well. And you can use also WordPress or blogging platforms, but you can also use specific ePortfolio tools. Again, I'm not here to talk about tools. You can ask, of course, at the end. But the idea here is that the students work on, they actually own their space. They own their little space in the context of your course. And that can really lead to quite a lot of benefits. So as I said before, a lot of these learning goals that we listed there, but in general, what technology can help with is integrative learning. So trying to help students link concepts, see the bigger picture. Of course, it takes training, but this is a tool, a space where students can train exactly that. And I will discuss examples in a second. Also independent learning, because of course, it's their space. So how they use it, how they populate it according to your prompts, I will get back to that in a second, is their choice. So it's their way of expressing themselves. And you can see a big variety of ways, more visual, some more with text. Again, it's up to them. You can give them the prompts, but there is quite a lot of freedom. And a lot of the students actually like that freedom. They are a little bit scared and skeptical in the beginning because it's an independent learning space. It's very different from anything else they've done in the classroom. But in the end, with a little bit of work and a little bit of training, they start to like it. And last but not least, it can be a space for reflection. And that's also something that maybe we don't do enough, asking students to reflect on their learning, of course, on the topic too, but also on their learning. So it's something really, it's a meta reflection. But I think especially in the context of learning with technology, this is something we could do more of. Asking students at the end of the term or the end of the semester, basically what was their, well, what did they find most difficult? What did they find most rewarding in learning with technology? That's an extra set of questions, I would say. But in general, what are their thoughts on the whole learning process? What were the ways that helped them the most? What was the obstacle, and so on? So all this can be contained in this piece of work. Now, this is a very versatile tool, so you can use it very differently. I will give a few examples, but I think it makes most sense to use it not necessarily as an assessment method or as an assignment. You can, of course, so grade it, but I think the most added value it brings as a space on which students work by themselves, and then you give feedback throughout the process. Not so the other interesting thing about this, and I mentioned it here, is that we are not looking only at the final product, like we look at an essay or at an exam. We see how they progress throughout the various tasks, and I think that's very, very important. And it's really cannot be underestimated to see the whole progress through which the students go within your course, and sometimes they might really, really surprise you. And of course, giving feedback at all those stages, it's very important. Now, how I have seen it used and assisted in the use of ePortfolios is basically in the context of politics or social science classes, where students each had to take one case, let's say one country, and they would have to become experts in that country throughout the class. And then I think it's easier to explain it here. So let's say you are talking about democracy or elections or so on, and then you have different topics related to that every week, as you would have it in a normal classroom, but you can also organize it like that online. And then each student chooses a country. You can give a possible countries, but you can also let them choose freely. Again, I'm just making up an example, but I think the idea is that you can have the students work either for a period of the semester or for the whole semester on this blog or portfolio with prompts. Now, the main point is that I don't think it makes that much sense to just give it to them in the beginning and say, here, reflect on what you learn about country X. When it works really well is every week with every topic, you give a prompt. So they have to look up media from that respective country, or they have to look up economic statistics, but in a very, very clear way. For example, once you ask them to find videos, or maybe to create videos, once you ask them to look into opinion polls. So really, really clear prompts help it. The nice thing about it is that once the students get going, you have a huge database or collection of resources you can pull from in the classroom. So, and also students feel ownership towards their learning. So you can call on them in the classroom to explain what the situation is in the country they are studying. And you can link that in different other classroom activities, like in debates, for example, or even in the final assessment, essay or project. So the links between this portfolio work, which is independent work, and the rest of the course are also very important. Again, happy to talk about that in the question and answer session. Now, last thoughts from my side is try to focus on the learning and not on the tools. So as I said throughout the presentation, it's important to try to imagine your students doing these activities, to try to map mentally their journey. It's not always very easy, and we don't tend to do it. Let's be honest, we don't tend to do it normally, but I think it can be really useful to imagine that and then try to find appropriate tools for exactly what you envisage and what you imagine. Again, don't underestimate the students, challenge them, let them be creative, and trust them. These are really, really crucial points, both from my experience and the experience of the faculty staff that I'm regularly working with. So really, really let them be creative and trust them, and they will often surprise you very positively. Even with the use of technology, there's lots of potential that, just given a little bit of space, they will tap into. And last but not least, you yourself should always be prepared to learn, because like we've seen in the past months, learning never ends. We always have to skill ourselves, and I think it's important to keep that mindset. Now, I would like to give you 10 minutes before we come back and sum it up with the discussion, and I'm looking forward to your questions. But I think just because we discussed about these two, or because I mentioned these two types of activities, again, they are very broad. You can really customize it to your courses. But I wanted to give it some thought, because let's face it, we don't have time to do that, not normally. So because you took this hour to be here, let's take the next 10 minutes, 12 minutes or so to think in a small group about how you would use this. Again, it doesn't have to be very formal. I can send you a template, but I think it's just easier. Let's keep it a bit more spontaneous. Let's just have you discuss in groups, choose one of these tools, methods, and think about how you would use it, and discuss in your groups how would use it, or if you already used it, how you did it. Maybe you use practitioners but without technology. So try to imagine how that would work. So yeah, I think that would be great. Yeah, I would love to have you have those questions afterwards, but I know they will not be there in the room. So maybe just make a note, or it's just basics, how you would organize the activity, who are your students, duration, and so on. I'll stop sharing, and yeah, looking forward to discussions. Hi, welcome back, everyone. Thanks a lot. Well, I do hope there was some interaction in your groups, but I think now the moment has come, and I saw that there were already some questions in the chat. To wrap all the discussion up, maybe you want to share something interesting from what you discussed in the group, but if not, if you have any questions, this is the moment to ask them.
So Mia, I think we've actually got a range of, Alex, I think we've got a range of questions, which if I can raise them with you, I think would be really, really helpful. So the first one, which was asked by Mariek, Mariek uses role play scenarios in teaching where students negotiate a democratic transition and they work in groups. And this is what was done previously face-to-face. Mariek's asking, how can this be done using online tools, particularly where you don't have breakout rooms? Are there any tips or ideas you can give for how that can be done easily in an online setting?
Thank you very much. That's a good question. I was actually searching the participants list to see if Simon Asherwood is here, because I would have definitely asked him to exemplify how he does his negotiation online. I think now he also does it hybrid, so he can give huge. Yeah, Simon, yes, you can jump to my to help me here. But I mean, I definitely think there are ways to do it, and also not thinking first synchronous. So think that you can do quite a lot of things also in a forum. I have seen very successful negotiations going in forums or even email or exchanging Google Docs so the technology, again, it's not the core here. So it's really going back to the design of your game or simulation or whatever, but I will really let Simon here, because I think I really don't want to, I want to pick on his expertise here. So yeah, don't let yourself be cut by the technology. Simon, please, if you wish.
Yeah, I mean, it's just as the thing I put in the chat, it's, you know, just thinking about what works for what you're trying to achieve. And I think it was the point you've already made, Alex, is that you know, your learning objectives have to be the starting and the end point of all of this. And there are lots of different ways. And I think, you know, to some extent, you do have to try things out a bit, but it's really about sense checking as you're designing, and then as you're running the thing, you know, whether it works. So, you know, I certainly am saying to my group, you know, I do something which is like a portfolio, but is at the end of the module, because that works well for what I'm trying to do. And again, I wouldn't be able to structure things in the same way as that comparative approach that you have, because for negotiation, all the elements are there all the time. So we can't isolate in quite the same way. But yeah, I think that's really the key point, is just why are you doing it like this? You know, is this the way that works best, and being led by those learning objectives rather than anything else?
Thank you so much, Simon. I'm just trying a little bit to think also in terms of what I've been talking about, ePortfolio. I think in a way you probably can combine the different activities. So you can have live sessions, but only for parts of the simulation, and then obviously have the students work together. And I saw that there was a question already before that probably will be asked in a second about group work. This is also not that easy online, but have them work together in groups, or have them develop their positions within a portfolio, and then everything comes a bit easier. But definitely include an asynchronous element, because I don't think it's possible to replicate what you would do in a classroom as a simulation on a one day into a Zoom session. It would be a monster Zoom session, and it would not be probably very, very useful for anyone. Thank you. But thanks, Simon, mainly, because yeah.
Okay, yeah, there's a related question from Jamal. Jamal says that often when you're doing group work, the face-to-face session is important in terms of setting it up, getting a rapport between students and getting students feeling comfortable with one another. And just any tips for how this sort of thing can be done online, where you don't have that face-to-face to get yeah, to get people feeling comfortable.
Yeah, this is actually something I've been thinking about quite a bit lately, because and you, by face-to-face you mean real face-to-face, right? Not Zoom. Yeah, so when that's not possible, and I don't see that possible in this academic year probably, then I think a lot more design has to go on behind the scenes actually. And this is not something that comes easy, because, you know, we just split the groups, people start working and everything is spontaneous. And now it's not like that. It's almost like a little play that you have to, like a screenplay. And it's not only about the screenplay so much as it is about providing the space. And I've been really thinking about this in the past days, in fact. So it's a good question, because as I said, I normally don't put technology first, but what bothered me lately is that I don't feel that the current platforms offer a space for groups to really work effectively together, both socially and even sometimes from the work perspective. So, and then I just put a question on Twitter, and luckily I have quite a nice personal learning network there. And a lot of people came by and basically said what tools they are using. And what surprised me to a certain extent, but I expected it, is that everyone tends to use a mix of tools. So for this, we use Teams, and then we bring them to Zoom, and then they use Microsoft SharePoint, and then, so everything is a bit scattered. And then I really start believing what Jamal says. It's really probably very difficult for students, but again, I think we would have to ask students and involve students in this process much more, to actually keep it all together. There is no home base. What I would argue for is trying to build, I don't know if there is yet that technology, but hopefully somebody will hear this, to really have a sort of group space. Some platforms do it better than others. Teams seems to cover quite a bit, but it's not something that students are used to yet. So they're getting into that. Others are much more project management tools. Again, this is not really a learning experience. It's a project management tool. So I would say that creating this space and that brings all the tools together, that allows students to customize and only use the tools they need, is very important. And also, again, it's up to them if they choose to meet to meet synchronously, or if they choose to do their work asynchronously. In the end, you know, also one consideration is that everyone says, well, students will choose their own channels, which is true. They do choose their own channels. So they will do WhatsApp or groups and stuff like that. Yes, so again, like what Marika says, you know, they use WhatsApp usually. The Canvas group pages, yes, I use that too. It has some tools, but of course not everything. So I think that part is still lacking. Now, I think if there was this group space, the whole work would be easier. So it's again a matter of creating not necessarily the tasks only, but allowing the students to a certain extent to regulate their own work, and also with you behind the scenes being there. But I don't think it's, yeah, I don't think it's there yet. And it's something we need to work on, but I think also there needs to be more work on the tools side. Because I think one argument a lot of people have made is, yes, but you know, students switch between apps, so why can't they switch between different tools we use in the classroom? Well, it's not the same thing. I mean, I really argue that it's not the same thing, but I would stop here for now and take another question.
Okay, we're just nearly towards the end of time. Leonie asked about where this is a situation where students are reluctant to use microphones and but happy to use chat, and any advice on that. And William asked about how we can avoid overusing students' bandwidth, but I suppose works is a question both in terms of the technical aspect, but also in terms, if you like, the pedagogic aspect. That I know some colleagues have said, how can we avoid giving them so many things to do simultaneously in a class that they find it difficult to cope with? Those questions will have to wait for another day because we're out of time. I'd just like to thank Alex for an absolutely fantastic talk, which has really opened up a range of issues. The next one of these talks is next Thursday, November the 19th, when Maxine David of Leiden University will be talking about, again, supporting students in a digital context, that's at 11 a.m, bit earlier than usual. If you go onto the PSA website, you can sign up for that there. The other things just to highlight are, if you're not a member of the PSA already, please go onto our website and join. The PSA offers lots and lots of opportunities for political scientists and IR scholars. We've currently just launched the new Psa Innovation Fund, which I encourage you to look at. Excellent opportunity to support academics during the COVID pandemic. And also there's an opportunity now to sign up for the PSA annual lecture, which Pippa Norris will be giving. So again, something really not to be missed. So we're at 4 o'clock. Can I just thank everybody and hopefully see you all next week. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, everyone. And please don't hesitate to contact me if there are questions, burning questions that you still have and I haven't had time to answer.
Thank you.